Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy.
Hey friends, welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Carrie.
How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic.
Are
Thank
you
you.
warm?
No, I am not. It's what, -8 degrees here today?
Yes.
It's fucking freezing.
I ran out to put letters in the mailbox, flip up the flag, ran back in, and I swear to God, I had frostbite on my nose.
This is like perfect weather for some warming bourbon.
Hell yeah. I am drinking Jefferson's Reserve,
Oh, a
and it
different
is very good.
Jefferson's.
Yeah. What are you drinking?
I am sipping on some Knob Creek. You know,
Yummy.
one of my faithfuls.
Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers to you.
Clink.
Clink.
Mm. Before we jump in, I have to put myself in the correction corner. So, a big, huge shout out to Monique, girl. Thank you for watching us because our last episode on Mahmoud Matan, I kept calling Africa a country.
And
None of us fucking caught it.
I'm fully aware it's a continent, but whilst
Samesies.
listening to you tell the story and then editing, I didn't catch it.
I know. And Monique is like, hey,
Dum-dums.
so Jamie, you corrected it, you pulled that out and re-uploaded. So for those of you that listened right away, I fucked up. Monique, thank you very
Yes,
much
thank you.
for having our backs. Sorry about that. So just wanted to get that out there. Thanks for I'm just gonna drink bourbon now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is episode 42 of Crime Will Tell. And this case was actually suggested to us by Gina Burke, who we met at a true crime themed trivia night at our favorite brewery.
Oh,
And
that's right.
yeah, and so she actually knows the family of the victim, who is Barbara Gaca. She said that this case has just not really been covered and asked if we would. I said yes. And so I'm finally getting around to it.
Finally, because that was a while
Yeah, that
ago.
was a bit
Yeah.
ago. So Gina, I apologize for the delay, but we're doing it, and I really hope I do right by her family, by telling Barbara's story and keeping her memory alive. This year actually marks the 70th anniversary of this horrible crime, and
Hmm.
I really honestly can't believe that it hasn't been covered more. This was a huge case at the time, but it's just one that I'd never heard of and is not covered. And so I was relying on a lot of newspaper sources from 70 years ago. And there were a lot of very conflicting details, which is
Blah.
always a real hoot when you're
Mm-hmm.
researching these. But there was a really great article that was written in 2009
Ooh.
by Richard Bach. I'm not sure. Last name is Bak. I'm not sure how you say that. For the Our Detroit magazine, and it was a really, really great resource for me. He actually interviewed the victim's father
Oh.
for the article, and so he had a lot of really great details about the case. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. This case takes us back to 1955. 31-year-old Frank Gaca. Their last name is actually spelled Gaca, but it's pronounced Gaca. And his wife Rita, who was 29, and their children lived on the east side of Detroit, Michigan. Frank worked as a mail carrier for the city, and Rita stayed home to care for their 4 young children. They had Barbara, who was 7 years old, Gloria, who was 6, 5-year-old Robert, and then 22-month-old Charles. Some sources said that they had 3 children, but I'm pretty sure they had 4.
Rita was pregnant literally for like 6 years straight.
Pretty much, yeah.
Fuck.
Ouch, right?
Yeah. Damn. So Barbara was the oldest at 7.
Yes. And Thursday, March 24th, 1955, was a pretty typical morning for the Gatza family. Frank got ready for work and he left the house to go do his mail route. Barbara was 7 and she was in the second grade. And this was a very devout Catholic family. So Barbara attended Catholic school. She was just weeks away from her first communion, which was a very big deal for her and her
Mm.
family and, just a really big step in her faith. So she got ready for school and she dressed in her school uniform and it was really cold that morning, so she put on a blue snowsuit and a babushka,
Aw, a babushka?
which if you don't know is a headscarf that ties under the chin. So they're
Oh my
typically
god.
worn by Russian or Polish women and the Gotzes were a Polish family.
That's
So,
adorable.
yes, isn't that the cutest thing?
The little 7-year-old with a babushka on.
Yeah,
Aw.
and side note, grandmothers and elderly women are also often called babushkas in Russia and Poland.
Okay, so the thing that you put on your head is called a babushka, but also older women are
You'll
called
hear people
babushkas?
say, like, "My babushka," and they mean, like, my grandmother or an older
Oh,
woman.
interesting. Is it because those older women always wear a babushka, and so
I
it's just
mean,
one and the same?
probably,
Interesting.
kinda goes
But
along those
also the
lines.
word babushka is cute.
I
That's a cute
know,
word.
and just picturing her.
I know, in her little 7-year-old snowsuit. I bet she couldn't put her arms down.
So she, was all bundled up. She kissed her mother goodbye and then left their house to, start her walk to school. She attended Assumption Grotto School, which was about 6 blocks away from the Gatza home. So she was
Okay.
used to, just making the
Yeah.
6 block walk to and from school. And so school days for Barbara pretty much looked the same. After walking to school, she'd first attend mass, then they would eat breakfast at their desks, and then begin just, a really action-packed day of learning from the nuns. And
An action packed day of learning with the nuns who had rulers.
yeah. So at noon, Barbara would actually walk back home to have lunch with her mother and her 2 younger siblings.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that was something that all students would do or if it was kind of an optional thing if some kids stayed and had lunch at school or if they'd all go home, I don't know, but I was like, "Aw." So I don't know if that was optional, but it was what Barbara did every day. And it was really just a weekday routine for her mother and her younger brother and sister. Not the youngest one, but the 2 closest to her age because they got to watch TV while they had lunch with Barbara.
Oh,
So they would,
that's
like,
pretty
wait
cool.
wait for Barbara to come home so they could actually get to I think they watched Soupy Sales was kind of their show that came on at that time.
Soupy sale.
But Barbara didn't show up for lunch that day. And, I'm sure that her little brother and sister were like, "Where's Barbara? It's time for Soupy Sales," and it just was like such a routine that it had to have been super alarming, that she wasn't home. So her mother, Rita, was obviously very concerned and she called the school to see if maybe she'd gotten hurt or was sick or something. And the school informed her that Barbara hadn't arrived at school that morning and that they
Oh,
they had just assumed that she was sick and had stayed home from school. So, of course, panic just immediately sets in for her mother, and she called police to report her missing because she would have been missing for hours at that point.
yeah.
Barbara's brother, Robert, who was 5 at that time, told the Our Detroit magazine that I'd mentioned that he remembered his mother just absolutely falling apart that day. Like, that's something that kind of stuck out from his childhood. She had her other 3 young kids at home, so it's not like she was able to just go out on this cold day and leave the house and go start looking for Barbara on her own. She was kind of stuck at home with her kids, but police, family, friends, neighbors, anyone that could immediately started looking for her. And her father, Frank, left work to start searching for his daughter. Word of her disappearance traveled really fast, and eventually thousands of people were looking for this little
Thousands?
girl. Yes.
Damn.
This little brown-eyed girl with her brown hair up in a ponytail. She had a missing front tooth,
That's
just, like, in
adorable.
her little snowsuit and babushka. I was just like, "Ah." So 3,000 Boy Scouts searched an area of 90 square blocks around the Gaca home. And just picturing all of these little Boy Scouts in their uniforms searching for another child is just so sweet and heartbreaking. And it's like I can just see it so clearly in my mind.
I wonder if they even kind of like truly comprehended what
I
they were
don't
looking
know.
for. 3,000? That is a lot of Boy
Yeah,
Scouts.
I think probably all the Boy Scouts in that area were just called to
That's a really good
help
idea.
search. Yeah. Law enforcement and volunteers, they were looking through yards and open garages, dumpsters, under cars and porches, vacant lots and buildings. I mean, just anywhere that they could think of that she might be. They were knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen her. Unfortunately, the search ended up being complicated by really heavy snowfall in the
Mm,
days after her disappearance. I mean, people were still
mm.
out looking for her, but it just
She could be covered. If she
exactly.
was out laying somewhere, she could be covered. And the more I think about it, this whole 3,000 Boy Scouts helping to search for Barbara. At first, I thought that was a really good idea. But what if one of them like stumbled across her body?
I don't know.
That poor kid or those poor kids would be traumatized.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's such a good idea. I don't know. Now I'm conflicted.
But I mean, at that point, I think early on, they were just thinking maybe she was lost.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't,
Yeah.
maybe she was hurt
Yeah.
somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, I kind of thought the same thing too. I'm like, God damn, that would suck for those poor kids. So her father, Frank, appeared on television the night after she went missing and was pleading with her abductor to return her unharmed. And two Detroit newspapers each offered $1,000 in reward money for Barbara's safe return, and one of them offered an additional $5,000 for information that resulted in the arrest and conviction of whoever was responsible for her abduction. So it
Wow.
was
The
like,
newspapers put that up?
yeah, yeah. So two of the Detroit newspapers.
Huh.
So on Saturday, March 26th, which would have been 2 days after Barbara went missing, the Detroit Free Press newspaper issued a special edition of their paper, specifically so they could get word out about Barbara's disappearance. The paper featured a photo of her, a physical description, who they should contact if they have any information, etc. And the special edition was delivered to everyone in that area, not just the subscribers of the newspaper.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So the city of Detroit came out big to
Yeah.
help
No
find
kidding. Almost
Barbara.
like a small town feel.
So, according to her parents, Barbara was very friendly with other kids and people she knew, but she was very shy around and even probably a bit leery of adults that she wasn't familiar with. So they didn't believe that she would just willingly get into a vehicle with someone she didn't know. And so this led to speculation that she either got into a vehicle with someone she knew or was like physically grabbed and pulled into a vehicle by a complete stranger. So those were kind of the two theories that they were working with. So of course,
She was
they
either tricked or abducted.
yeah.
Well,
And
tricked and abducted or forcefully abducted.
yeah, and they, police started talking with friends and family, that were just to try and kind of clear people and see if there was somebody that she potentially could have trusted that she would have gone with. Police did the standard procedure in a case like this, and they questioned all of the known pervy dirtbags in the area. Tips came just pouring into law enforcement. Some seemed to be legit, and others were just rumors or even hoaxes. One boy who knew Barbara said that he saw her about 4 blocks from her house that morning that she went missing and that she told him that she was waiting for a friend. So he was just kind of like, okay, cool. Two other boys told police that they saw Barbara get into a blue car with an unknown man. They stated that Barbara was talking with another boy near a busy street when a car pulled up and offered her a stick of gum. Then she got in the car and drove off. That wouldn't have happened, according to her parents, if it wasn't somebody that she knew already. So, two other people came forward saying that they saw a man driving a green Hudson at a gas station. A little girl matching Barbara's description was in the car with him. And the man who was pumping the gas for the vehicle said that the girl looked really scared. And the man driving the car was described to police as a white male in his early 40s, around 5 feet 6 inches tall and about 150 pounds. People were, I mean, they were like just getting these leads, and it was just like a scramble to try and figure out where Barbara might have gone. Police and the FBI received all kinds of tips regarding Barbara's disappearance. A ransom note was received by the family demanding $25,000 for her safe return. The handwritten, unsigned note was postmarked from Toledo, Ohio, which was just across the Michigan border, like the Michigan Ohio border. Police also searched through motel rooms and vehicles in a particular section of Toledo after they received a tip that Barbara's abductor was driving a blue sedan, specifically a 1953 Ford Tudor. So again, they're just getting leads about
All these
different
leads.
cars and
Yeah.
yeah, just like sending people in different directions.
Wait, can we go back to the ransom note? Did it say like meet us at a certain time for the drop and then you'll like
Yeah, I didn't say, like, what the instructions were or anything, but they did end up like, police did determine that the ransom note was likely just a scam, just somebody taking
oh
advantage of
man,
the family, which is happens in
it still happens.
well, like, in kidnapping cases around this time, other people would come forward and try and get money, like, they do take advantage of the families. I've heard it in
My
multiple cases, and
God.
it's really sad. Her father, Frank, believed it was a prank because they just weren't a family with money, and so they seemed like they would be really unlikely targets for someone to seek out for ransom for their daughter. He was just like, "We don't have money, so why would
Why
someone
would
s"
anyone steal our daughter in the hopes of getting cash? Like we don't have that.
Yeah, we would do anything for her, but we can't offer a lot of money for
They
her
would do
return.
anything for love, but they won't do that. Is that what you're
Exactly.
saying? Okay.
Yes. Yep. Unfortunately, despite all of the efforts by volunteers and law enforcement, Barbara's body was found a week later on
Ah,
March 31st, 1955, at a dump area in West Bloomfield Township, Michigan, which
mm,
is a really small town about 25 miles northwest of where she lived. I mean, this was really out in the middle of nowhere near a railroad line and not an area that a lot of people would have frequented. I'm also not sure if this was like an official city dump like we're used to now, or just an area where people dumped their random shit and garbage, because
mm,
that happened a lot in more
yeah.
secluded areas. There was
Rural.
just
Yeah.
kind yeah, you would see just like old washing machines and trash in a ditch somewhere. So I wasn't 100% sure on that, but it was definitely some sort of dump site. She ended up being found by a railroad worker. There was a group of men working near a railroad siding, and I had no idea what the fuck that was, so I looked it up. And a railroad siding is a section of
Wait,
track.
is this a rabbit hole?
It is a little bit. This is definitely a little tiny bunny
Okay.
hole. It's just a
Well,
short one.
I'm all ears.
Bunny ears. Okay, so a railroad siding is a section of track where trains basically pull off another track that runs parallel to the main track. I'm sure you've probably seen these where like a train track is just going along and then a section of it just kind of curves off and then there's another section of track going alongside of the main track.
Yes.
So basically at the siding the train can either continue straight on the main track or take the curved track and just kind
Right.
of boop off to the side, and they're typically used to load or unload train cars, store unused train cars, or even allow for trains to move past each other.
Oh, okay.
Her body was found about 200 feet from a road close to the railroad siding. And as I mentioned before, it had been snowing that week, which had likely maybe helped conceal her
Mm,
body a little bit for several days. It had warmed up that day that she was found, so the snow had started to melt, which might have made it possible for the worker that spotted her to, discover her body. After she was found, some of the workers ran to a nearby house where the owner of the house called the state police and reported that they had found a body. Barbara's body had been wrapped up in a green army blanket. She'd been raped, strangled,
Mm.
and stabbed 15 times with a small knife to her torso. While searching the area, police discovered tire tracks and some large footprints that led from near Barbara's body to that dirt road that was close to this dumping area. They found her rosary, a composition book, and her pencil case
So
scattered
she
around
was
near her body.
taken.
Yeah, just on her way to
Yeah.
school. Like these were
She
obviously
obviously was
item.
abducted in a car because ended up being dumped
Yeah.
25 miles away. Man.
Following an autopsy, it was determined that she had been raped and murdered within 2 to 4 hours after she was abducted, and that both had happened in a clean space. So I'm assuming that there weren't like leaves or
Uh,
debris or anything that would have indicated that she was outside or a
sure.
garage or something like that. So it wasn't like she'd been, held somewhere for several days or anything and then brought to that location. She had partially digested chocolate coated peppermint candy in her stomach. And they believe that she died soon after eating the candy, which is just such a sad detail to me that somebody may have
Yeah.
used candy to lure her or try and get her to calm down. I don't know, but
Yeah.
based on the way that it had been digested, they said that I think there was something with the way, like, if you're stressed out, it impacts how much acid is in your stomach,
Oh,
and that would have determined how long, just kind of based on the amount, like, little amount that candy had been digested.
okay. So what you're saying is in the autopsy, they were able to determine that she was killed within 2 to 4 hours of being taken because she had eaten this like chocolate coated peppermint candy or whatever. Did I
Mhm.
just make that up? Did you
No,
say that?
that was
Okay,
absolutely
good.
correct.
And she ate it, and then right after she ate it, shit got real
Yeah, like
because
she was
her
scared,
stress
and
yeah. Oh my god, that's
isn't that
fucking
heartbreaking?
yeah, it is. She was 7.
I know. Just this little tiny thing in a snowsuit. I just ugh. So, several witnesses came forward and said that they had seen a car at that dump sometime around 10:30 or 11 o'clock the morning that she was abducted. They said it was a newer Buick with a cream-colored top, but some witnesses said it was green, some thought it was maroon. There was, like, really kind of conflicting
That's
things.
so odd because eyewitness statements are so reliable.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But I
Hmm.
believe that most of them, if not all, said that the car's trunk was open, but they hadn't seen anyone near the vehicle. I mean, it could have been somebody dumping anything, I guess, but it was pretty specific in that time frame that a
Hmm.
lot of people had seen a vehicle, and obviously something was probably being taken from the trunk and being dumped at that area. Barbara's body was laid to rest on April 5th, 1955, and she was buried in the white dress that she was going to be wearing to her first
Mm,
communion.
fuck.
Thousands of people, like 15,000 people
Holy shit.
showed up to view Barbara's body and pay their respects to her family. Now, I mean, I'm sure there were some people just there out of morbid curiosity, but there was so much just overwhelming love and support from the community for that family. Barbara's casket was donated to the family, and the plot at Mount Olivet Cemetery, where she was buried, was also donated by the cemetery. So again, they're just
That's a
like,
community coming
yeah, it's
together.
like you said, this feels like a small town.
Mhm.
So now we got to talk about the suspects in this case, which there were no shortage of.
Wow, okay. So we got some creepy people in the general vicinity.
Yeah. So first up is A plus asshole Paul Hassel, or Hassel. I'm not sure how you'd say it. He was 53 years old at the time and lived in Redford, Michigan, which is another suburb of Detroit. He had previous convictions for child molestation in 1940 and for indecent exposure in 1953.
Huh.
along with a lot of other complaints against him. There was just a lot of like, this guy is a creep and he is inappropriate. A friend of his had actually contacted police stating that while riding around with him, he had offered to show her where Barbara's body had been found. He said that he had hunted frequently near that dump site, so he was very familiar with the area.
Hmm.
Police ended up searching his green Chevy and found Vaseline, candy, and an army blanket.
Oh.
So, very
Ooh, I don't
suspicious.
fucking like that at all.
Yeah, no, neither do I. And in
Ah.
his house, they found several dolls that he would use to lure young girls.
Stop.
So
Ugh.
he's
That is
absolutely
so gross.
disgusting. But he had also started a new job at a plant in Plymouth, Michigan, which is another suburb that is north of Detroit. And the morning of Barbara's disappearance, several of his coworkers could verify that he had clocked out at 7:20 a.m. So police really weren't sure if he could have had time to drive from where he was on the north side of Detroit to the east side where Barbara lived and just randomly abduct her before 8 a.m. Because, I mean, at that time, there wasn't like a quick freeway to move around the city. This was 2-lane roads with a lot of stoplights, busy morning traffic. Like they just were like, it just didn't seem like he would have time to do all that.
Because he would have had to have snagged her before she got to school.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't seem like he would have had any reason to go to that area and just hope that he would find a little girl walking alone that he could pick up. It seemed like a little bit of a stretch to police, especially since he was cooperative and he ended up agreeing to 6 different polygraph tests, which were all
Wow.
inconclusive. So he was really there and trying to help. However, years later in 1967, he was picked up by police after complaints of his inappropriate behavior with 2 young girls. He met with his lawyer and he ended up confessing to Barbara's murder. After which, he went home and he shot himself in the head with a shotgun.
Oh my gosh.
There is no doubt that this guy was a giant turd, but even Barbara's father believed that Hassel wasn't responsible for her death.
Because the
Ye
timing didn't work out for him to
Yeah,
get.
yeah, and I mean, he had committed other crimes, and so maybe he just carried a lot of guilt for the ones that he had committed and knew he wasn't able to stop. Who knows? So that's
Suspect number one.
and it's just there's a lot of these that you're like, "That's him." What?
Oh, maybe not. Okay.
So based on the tip that they received about the unknown man that the boys had allegedly seen drive off with Barbara, police were on the search for a man named James Gibson Burns. Burns was a 41-year-old man from the Cleveland area who was an ex-convict from Pennsylvania, and he had been identified by photos by 2 young girls in Cleveland as the man who had abducted them on March 18th, which was the week before Barbara was killed. He had lured the 6 and 8-year-old girls into a truck while they were walking home from school that day. He drove the girls into a wooded area and molested the 8-year-old girl. The truck got stuck in mud, so he ended up fleeing the vehicle but left the girls. And a car had been stolen in that area shortly after the girls were abducted. So based on the, potential similarities of the abductions, police obviously wanted to find this guy. And really that's all the info I could find on that motherfucker.
So he abducted two girls. He obviously took him in a truck into some wooded, muddy area,
Mhm.
got the truck stuck, molested the 8-year-old, but the other girl was unharmed,
Mhm.
but there. And then he realized the truck was stuck. So then he left the truck and the girls.
Yeah, and then a vehicle was stolen not long after, so they assumed that he stole the car and fled, and then I couldn't find anything else about him.
And then no follow up, no nothing, at least in reporting.
Right, but the similarities between young girls being just abducted walking home from school or to school, they had to look at him. They were like, we want to talk to that guy.
This is where obscure cases back in the day with conflicting reporting or very little reporting or whatever.
It gets really frustrating because you're like, then what? What? That's it? Because it'll just be like a short newspaper article or something, and you're like, "Ah."
Annoying.
So there were also some concerns about a visiting priest from the Assumption Grotto Catholic Church. Not long after Barbara's body was found, he was assigned to another church in Nova Scotia. And unfortunately, it's been uncovered in a lot of investigations regarding priests and allegations of sexual assaults against children that the Catholic Church often, they'll just kind of play creeper Red Rover and just send priests to another church. So they're like, Red Rover, send Father Perv right over. And they just like let it just kind of fizzle away and act like nothing happened. I'm not trying to throw shade on the Catholic faith, but them's just the facts, guys. It's been reported multiple times that that's what has happened in cases. And it really didn't seem like there was much effort at all put into investigating or talking to that priest. Barbara's father, he really wanted that priest to be looked into more, and just nothing ever came of it.
Hmm.
But it's suspicious as fuck that he was reassigned right after her body was located. I do not like that.
Assumption Grotto is the church where she went to
Hmm.
school, right?
Yeah, right. And he was just a visiting priest
Mm.
to that parish or whatever. I don't know what they're called.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Detective Tim Sheridan of the West Bloomfield Township Police Department started looking into Barbara's case. Despite the Detroit Police Department and even the Michigan State Police being far better equipped to handle the investigation, the jurisdiction stayed with the West Bloomfield Township Police. So this tiny little town had the jurisdiction over this pretty major case. I think there's been some criticism about them not letting some bigger agencies maybe take the lead on the investigation, but whatever.
Oh boy.
So, Detective Sheridan was 3 years old when Barbara was killed, and he grew up in the Detroit area. So this was a case that he had, just kind of grown up hearing stories about, and it had just kind of always stuck with him, and he really wanted to solve her case.
It's very interesting that, I mean, we've covered a few cases where the investigator that eventually gets on the case was just a child and grew up in that area hearing about it, and it always stuck with him and then or her, and then they went into law enforcement as a career, and then when they became a detective they were like, I want to open this cold case
Yeah.
because it's been with me this. Like, I think that's pretty damn cool. We've covered a few cases like that. I think that's neat. Talk about really investing in your community.
Yeah, and maybe some of those cases are the reason they actually got into law enforcement
Maybe.
and ended up
Yeah.
solving them, which is pretty cool. In March of 1996, Detective Sheridan submitted the details of Barbara's murder to VICAP. And VICAP is the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension System. And we've talked about it before, but it's used to collect and compare information about different crimes that might link to details of other cases, possibly, leading to crime sprees or serial killers or whatever it might be. And the submission to VICAP led to a suspect in Barbara's case. His name was William Henry Redmond. So Redmond died on January 2nd of 1992 in Grand Island, Nebraska at the age of 69. He died from emphysema and heart complications while he was awaiting trial in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for the rape and murder of an 8-year-old girl named Jane Marie Altoff. I think that's how you say her name. I'm like fucking up names left and right. Sorry, everybody. Or I'm nailing them. I'm not sure. We'll see.
It's 50-50 at this
Right?
point.
This is true. Um, Jane was murdered on April 26th, 1951. her body was found in a truck at a carnival just outside of Philadelphia. She'd been strangled, and Redmond had worked as the Ferris wheel operator at the carnival. So he
Oh god,
probably
that is so creepy.
smelled fantastic. But also, I mean, like, what a perfect job to have if you're going to commit
If you're
crimes,
a
right?
pedophile, absolutely.
Yeah, you're just bouncing around all over the country. You're in one spot for a few days and then likely gone before anyone got to know who you were, or possibly even before like a victim could be discovered. You're
Oh my
just
god.
on to the next place. Anyway, Jane had been seen talking to him at the carnival, and his fingerprints were found inside the cab of the truck where Jane's body was found. His trial for Jane's killing had been delayed due to motions filed by his defense team, and he ended up being released on bond in 1988. So he ended up going back to Nebraska while he was waiting for his trial to begin because he, I guess, wasn't considered a big threat because he was old and in really crappy health. However, while he had been in custody prior to being released, he had allegedly admitted to another inmate to killing Jane as well as three other girls. And he smirked and said, "They may have me on this one, but not the others." Like just kind of bragging about all the girls that he'd killed, but not
Mm.
giving too many details. Just a scumbag. So Redmond had had multiple convictions for sexual offenses and had been identified as a suspect in several different murders. He had a very extensive shitbag resume, which I'll try and highlight here just real quick. In 1935, he sexually assaulted two young girls in Lancaster, Ohio, and attempted to rape another girl in 1938. There was another sexual assault in Florida in 1949, and this was the year that investigators believe he escalated to murdering his victims.
Mm.
11-year-old Joanne Lynn was murdered on September 30th, 1949, in Rochester, New York. Redmond was working at a fair nearby.
Mm.
Just months after Jane's murder, Beverly Potts, who was 10 years old, went missing on August 24th, 1951, after attending a carnival in Cleveland, Ohio. She was never seen again. And he was also linked to the murder of Connie Smith, who was 10 years old, and she disappeared after running away from a summer camp in Connecticut in 1952. She has also never been found.
Mm. How was he linked to Connie Smith?
It didn't say if there was a carnival or a fair or
Sure. Just
what
that
was
he
going
there's a
on,
link
or
there.
yeah, maybe he was in that area. I'm not sure, but it didn't really specify on that one. So detectives were able to pretty solidly link him to three murders. Obviously, the ones where he's traveling around with his Ferris wheel, but not to a fourth killing. And so it was suspected that Barbara was possibly the fourth victim that he was referring
Mm.
to.
Okay.
Detectives knew that they had very limited time to try Redmond due to his really crappy health. So they were using DNA and other more advanced technologies to try and push evidence through to try and solve these, decades old murders and hopefully find some answers for the young victims' families. But unfortunately, Redmond died before he could go to trial and be convicted of the crimes or potentially confess to the crimes, give details on where bodies might be, anything like that. So it was very, very frustrating and disheartening for all these investigators from like all these different jurisdictions that had kind of come together to convict this guy. They were finding pieces that linked him, and then the motherfucker died
Yeah, it's
before.
like he got the last control piece, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And whatever he knew or did, he took to the grave.
yeah. And I mean, he seemed like he was the perfect suspect for Barbara's murder. But when he was trying to find possible links to Barbara's murder, Detective Sheridan learned that Redmond was apparently working for a railroad in New Mexico at that time. There is still just a lot of a belief that he might have been her killer, or he
Mm.
was just like, it just fit in with all those other girls. Another suspect was identified by there was, like this was just not a good place for children apparently because there were a lot of just scummy assholes lurking
Targeting
around.
kids.
There were a lot of other people that they talked to, but were cleared immediately. Like, there was so many possible suspects in this case that it's alarming. So another suspect was identified by Detective Sheridan, but he wasn't ever named. I don't think it's because was ever an official suspect.
Hmm. Person of interest, maybe?
Yeah. But he was 13 years old in
Hmm.
1955 and had run away from home. From what
Maybe
I could
that's
tell,
why he wasn't named.
yeah. But he was arrested after being found in a stolen car a block from the Gatz's house 2 days before Barbara's body was discovered. He had been sleeping in an abandoned car, and he ended up, he was interviewed by the detectives at the juvenile home following his arrest, despite not being able to account for where he was the day of Barbara's murder. There weren't like any additional interviews with him.
Hmm.
I don't know if he just wasn't cooperating and not telling them, or they weren't able to verify what he had told them, but they couldn't confirm what he had been up to the day that she was killed, and he was found a block from her house.
And then they just let it go. They're like, well, I guess we just can't confirm it. So
Yeah,
I'm
they're like, all
just going
right,
to let that one go.
just check. But so Detective Sheridan is like reviewing through all these case files and, reading through stuff. And so he's like, I want to speak to this guy. So he went to visit him in 2000.
Oh,
He had a family and he ran a business. I mean, he didn't have any sexual offenses on his record. So Sheridan went to go speak with him, and he told the magazine that I'd mentioned that he made a really big deal when the detective asked to talk to him. And like in front of his employees, he was like saying really loud, like, hey, everybody, these guys think I killed a little girl, like making a big scene about it and just
wow.
being just fucking weird about it. He initially agreed to take a polygraph, but then backed out. And he also, after kind of some convincing, agreed to provide a DNA sample to detectives. And after multiple agencies, like the FBI was coming in, the state police, they were all kind of in discussions about this investigation. It seemed like things might be heating up a little bit. The lawyer and the family members for this guy showed up at the police station asking for the investigation against him to end. And while his family and lawyers are in there, this guy is just sitting, like stayed out in the parking lot like a little titty baby, letting all these people beg for his mercy. He then just shows that he decided that he wasn't going to cooperate with the investigation anymore. And there wasn't really any evidence to tie him to Barbara's case, and he was really young at the time, but it was very strange that he wasn't forthcoming with investigators during the initial interviews that he had right after Barbara was killed, and then was all wishy-washy when he was questioned later on, and it just really seemed like he had something to hide. And so Detective Sheridan said in this newspaper article that he was 80% sure that this guy was her killer.
80%. That's pretty strong.
I think there was just something about him that he was like, this is the dude. Following Barbara's murder, there were 60 detectives assigned to work her case. And they were working overtime, busting ass trying to get this thing solved. But within 2 years, after investigating thousands of tips that had come in and looking into hundreds of suspects, the investigation just kind of fizzled out. They just,
But they didn't follow up on the priest and they didn't follow up on the dude in the truck and then they didn't
yeah.
follow up on.
What's even more frustrating is that a lot of evidence has been lost over time. The clothing that Barbara was wearing that day and vaginal smears that were taken from her body are all gone.
What what do you mean gone? How are they
They just
how
disappeared over the years. I don't know if they got thrown away, whatever, but they are no longer available. I mean, that pretty much eliminates any chance of matching DNA
Yeah.
to this case. which is again 70 years old. And so the chances that her killer, that they're still alive is super slim at this point.
Oh, I hate this so much.
So Barbara's parents and family always held on to hope that her case would be solved. Her parents and siblings did the best that they could, to move forward with their lives after Barbara had died. They had Barbara's younger siblings that they still had to care for, and they ended up having two more children. Her father, Frank, told the Hour Detroit, "We always figure that someday someone who knows about it will confess or want to clear his conscience, so we keep waiting." Barbara's case is still open and an active investigation, but it remains unsolved. And unfortunately, her mother, Rita, passed away in 2004, and her father, Frank, died in 2019, not
Mm,
knowing who took their little girl from them.
fuck.
So, yeah, that is the just incredibly sad and frustrating case of Barbara Gaca.
Like you said, people that were involved or people that knew about it, or even the person that raped and murdered her, they're probably not alive anymore. So if you don't have evidence and you don't have people that were involved, how are you ever supposed to be able to solve it?
Yeah. I listed off all of those suspects that all of them to me seem like pretty damn good
Viable.
suspects.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, eh, or not, whatever. It's just like, well, what the fuck?
Man.
The number of unsolved abductions and murders of girls that age from that era is pretty alarming. And I mean, of course, it was just a time there weren't ring doorbell, cams and
Yeah.
cell phones and immediate ways to contact somebody and ways to track people constantly.
Hmm.
But it just is so damn sad that these girls that would be almost 80 now, some of them have never been found. Nobody ever knew what happened to them. And then like in Barbara's case, her parents have passed away not knowing what happened to her, and witnesses at this point, even the youngest children are elderly at this point.
Well, I remain hopeful that someone somewhere is still alive and still knows something and is willing to get whatever he or she knows off their chest before they pass away.
Yeah.
There's still a chance. There's
Yeah, and I'm
still,
hoping
yeah.
that there's some evidence somewhere that has like a
Like maybe it got
tiniest bit of
misfiled.
DNA. Yeah, there's got to be DNA somewhere on something that could potentially link to someone. And like I said at the beginning, this case, I was really kind of taken aback by how little it has been covered. So I'm hoping that we can at least help keep her memory alive a little bit longer and maybe bring some more awareness to this case. Maybe we could be a little piece of keeping the investigation going on this, or somebody being like, "Yeah, I do remember that," and just having some little nugget of info that might lead to something, who knows.
Maybe it's even other family generations. Like I remember my grandmother telling me about this guy who, you know what I mean? You just never know.
Yeah. So, yeah, this one I was just really frustrated because I was would be reading stuff and I'm like, "Oh, ooh, this guy seems like he's the one." And then it was just kind of like,
Mwah.
and then
Nothing happened
nothing.
with it.
That was it. And it was just like you'd get hopeful. And me researching this case feeling that I can't imagine what her family went through for years, just like a little glimmer of hope and then nothing. And then nothing. And her father, I know, said they never changed their phone number just in the hopes that somebody would try calling with a tip or it's just you do your best to move on, but I
Man,
can't imagine going that many decades not knowing what happened to your child.
I've heard often that, like family members who have had someone close to them murdered or they've just disappeared, and that the not knowing is actually the worst part.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
even if they were found dead, that would be better than just perpetual not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. But thank you for the suggestion, Gina. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, we love you.
Yeah, we do. And even more when you tell your friends about the podcast or
Yeah, we really like
leave
that.
us a
Rate, review,
positive
subscribe.
rating. Yeah, all
Heck
that good
yeah.
stuff. So, but no,
Yeah.
but seriously, we do appreciate you guys a lot. And thank you for
Yeah.
listening. So, with that, goodbye, Carrie.
Goodbye, Jimmy.
That was quick.
Why is everybody looking at me?
Hey, stupid.
Should we do that over? That was a shit show.
Take fucking 35. Here we go.
Here's my fucking pen.
I don't know.
That's perfect.
To be comfy and fucking get my groove on.
I bet that was fun.
Those bitches did it.
Total asshole move, yeah.
Whoopsie.
Come here, girl. Here we go.
I said, it's